In the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, you'll find one of the most remote inhabited places on planet Earth. Until recently, the only way to get here was to spend 5 days on a boat. In this video, we'll explore the newest way to travel to the secret of the South Atlantic.
Hello, Jet Setters. I'm Jeb Brooks from greenergrass.com. There are a handful of aviation experiences every av geek should have. Things like the island hopper in the Pacific, or having a hamburger at the In-N-Out Burger at LAX. Well, there's a new one in town. It's flying to St. Helena, and I got the chance to try it out. I hope you'll enjoy this video in which we explore this relatively new service to a pretty new airport. Let's check it out.
St. Helena is a tiny island. It's home to about 4,500 people and sits in the South Atlantic Ocean between Angola and Brazil. Yeah, it's remote, but it's also beautiful. I've wanted to visit St. Helena for a long time. Its role in the age of exploration cannot be understated. The Portuguese used it as a secret base for restocking their ships. In fact, they left a herd of goats and planted a citrus tree orchard there. It then became a key possession of the British East India Company before it was suddenly converted into a prison for the world's most feared man, Napoleon. He died there too. Today, it's a fascinating British overseas territory. Until 2017, it was only possible to get here by booking passage on the RMS St. Helena, a ship that linked it with Cape Town. That trip took 5 days. Everything changed, however, on October 14, 2017, when the St. Helena Airport opened to commercial flights, linking the island to the mainland in a matter of hours, not days. Before opening, the airport faced all kinds of challenges related mostly to its remote location and difficult terrain. In this video, we'll explore the airport in order to understand what makes it one of the world's most extreme. But first, if you like travel and aviation, please click the subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you can be among the first to know when I post a new video. I started my day in Johannesburg. We flew first to Walvis Bay, a tiny port town in Namibia where we took on fuel, before we continued on to St. Helena. This flight has a lot of quirks as a result of its remote destination, and we'll talk about them throughout this video. But suffice it to say, this flight should be on every aviation enthusiast's bucket list. When I made my trip on the 15th of February 2020, before travel was restricted, there were 2 flights per week. This one from Johannesburg was on a Saturday, and Tuesdays saw the island linked with Cape Town. Even though Airlink is a separate airline from South African Airways, I had access to the SAA lounge because my flight was booked in business class. This access ends in April 2020 when the 2 airlines completely part ways. Naturally, the window drew me in. The space was comfortable, and most importantly, given my current state, you see, I didn't sleep much the night before because I was so excited about this flight. The coffee flowed. Soon it was time to head to the gate. Now, the route is served by a very capable aircraft, the Embraer 190. Only a handful of pilots, less than 10 in fact, are certified to make this flight because of the unusual characteristics of St. Helena's airport. As our designated boarding time approached, I headed to the top of this massive escalator down to the bus gates. I've been here before, and there's something just absolutely dramatic about this space. Knowing that my destination is somewhere remote and exciting, it's really wonderful. The last time I was down here, I was on my way to Botswana aboard an Avro RJ85, also with Airlink. Anyway, the gate area here was bustling.
It's a lot like the island hopper in that people are recognizing each other. They didn't know they were on the flight. So just a real party atmosphere with a lot of people getting ready for this flight to St. Helena.
Even though I knew not a soul on board, my own excitement was through the roof.
I am so excited about this trip. Can't wait to share it with you.
Soon, we were getting on board a bus. Now, this was one time when getting on early was not an advantage. I stood in this spot right here for about an hour as we waited for lingering passengers, and then slowly made our way across the ramp. Finally, we arrived at the aircraft, only to have to wait even longer before finally being able to get off the bus. One of the reasons for the lengthy process was because of a delicate dance that was taking place behind the scenes. Airlink's operation team, the meteorological office in St. Helena, and our flight deck crew were communicating. We would not be able to take off from Johannesburg until everyone, that's dispatch, the airport authority, and our flight deck crew, were all confident the weather was acceptable on the island. This is because diversion options are extremely limited on this route. Boarding from the ramp via air stairs is always a highlight for me, especially when the weather is this nice. I made sure I was the last person to get on the airplane, maximizing my time down here.
There it is.
As I mentioned earlier, the Embraer 190 is a very special aircraft with highly skilled pilots uniquely capable of handling this flight, because landing on the island may mean touching down with a 15-knot tailwind. It's very likely you'll go your entire life without landing with as much as a 5-knot tailwind. Airlink has 2 aircraft in their fleet capable of making this flight. They're fitted with special engines that deal with the hot and high performance it requires. All their other E190s have different engines.
We'll be pushing back shortly, departing runway 03. That's a departure in a northeasterly direction, and then once we're airborne, it'll be left into announcing climbing to initial cruising altitude of 34,000 feet, and the flight time from Walvis Bay will be 2 hours and 2 minutes, and then the en route flight from Walvis Bay to St. Helena, 3 hours and 8 minutes. We'd like to invite you now to sit back, relax, and enjoy this sailing flight with us. If there's anything else we can do to make the flight more comfortable, please stay to us.
Most of the time, this flight does not go straight to St. Helena. Instead, there's usually a technical stop in Namibia to take on additional fuel. If the load is particularly light and the winds are just right, that stop's not necessary, but we'd have to make it today. And before leaving Johannesburg, our pilots, dispatchers, and St. Helena's meteorologists would once again ensure the weather was acceptable for us. Good news, it was. Meanwhile, on board, I settled in for this 2-hour flight. The cabin is comfortable. Individual air vents are available at each seat, along with reading lights. Legroom is excellent up here, even when the seat pocket is full of camera gear. But the best part? Naturally, it's the views of the African countryside passing below. The tray table is sturdy. Now, I'd recommend bringing your own in-flight entertainment, maybe a book or an iPad. All passengers, both in business and economy, were offered a small snack on this leg. I had the chicken, which was really nice. It hit the spot and was certainly better than the food in the lounge. The landscape beneath us was practically otherworldly. One of the toughest parts of my KLM flight from Amsterdam to Cape Town a couple of days before was missing the window views. Africa is one of the most diverse and beautiful continents, and a window over this part of the world is something for which to be incredibly grateful. Flight attendants passed out customs and immigration forms, which we all promptly completed. But soon the seatbelt sign was back on, and we began our approach into Walvis Bay for our technical stop. On the ground in Walvis Bay, we sat back and relaxed as ramp agents got to work. They had to fuel our aircraft for the next leg, 3 hours over the open ocean.
We will be starting the refueling procedure. For your own safety, kindly remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Thank you.
And the refueling procedure is vital. We had to take on enough fuel to circle the airfield at St. Helena for a while in case the winds were disagreeable or something was wrong with the runway. If the weather was really squirrely, our only option would be to divert to Ascension Island, some 800 miles away from St. Helena. Put another way, everyone had to be confident we'd be able to land when we arrived.
Flight deck, the refueling has been completed and we'll be on our way shortly. We're going to be departing runway 27, the runway we landed on, and that'll be a right-hand turn. Climbing to initial cruising altitude of 36,000 feet. We'll be steaming up to 38,000 feet a little bit later on the flight.
As we left Namibia, flight attendants sprayed the cabin to kill any pests that may have gotten on board. Thankfully, they didn't get this one, though. Like many smaller airfields, Walvis Bay doesn't have a taxiway that runs the entire length of the runway. As a result, pilots execute a maneuver called a back taxi, in which they use the runway to taxi along. That also means the airplane does a complete 180 just before taking off, a real treat for an aviation enthusiast. Soon, we were on our way again. The weather in St. Helena was looking good, and just after takeoff, we left the African coast behind. The next time we'd see land, it would be the island of St. Helena. Lunch was soon served. It was a curry and a pastry. It was flavorful and, despite being cold, was the perfect treat for this phase of flight. And as I finished my lunch and dreamed of what was waiting for me on the island, the airport was coming to life. Ramp workers busily get equipment and vehicles used only once or twice a week in place for our arrival. Fire engines are brought out of the garage. And inside the tower, things get even busier in the Met Office, or meteorological office, where the Royal Meteorologist has been providing updated forecasts even more frequently as we approach the island. And up top, air traffic control is spinning into action too, communicating with the crew of my plane as well as Luanda Center, the controlling authority over this part of the airspace. The runway is checked for debris to ensure it's ready for our landing. And soon our pilots call the tower with vital information like the number of souls on board, which is then communicated to the island search and rescue service. We begin our approach into one of the world's most challenging airports.
We've commenced our descent for St. Helena. As planned, we're going to be approaching St. Helena from the northern side, landing towards the south onto runway 20. The temperature on the ground 22 degrees Celsius, partly cloudy conditions, and southeasterly wind blowing at between 20 and 30 kilometers per hour.
You see, at either end of the runway are massive cliffs which create challenging wind conditions. Everyone on the plane knows what's facing the flight deck crew, and as we get closer, a hush came over the cabin. For once, I wasn't the only one with my eyes glued to the window. Everyone was checking out this approach. This is just another example of why I love aviation so very much. A place previously so far removed from the world, nearly a week away from anywhere, is now reachable in a matter of hours. There's no Jeb score for this flight because it's such a unique and special one. Instead, this earns special status alongside flights like the Island Hopper, the world's shortest flight, the world's longest one, as an aviation enthusiast's must-have experience. Here's hoping we're all flying soon, so I can see you in the sky.
Hello, jet setters. I'm Jeb Brooks from greenergrass.com. Right now, it is pouring rain in the middle of the South Atlantic, and here I am. I came here thanks to a brand new airport that was just opened a couple of years ago. But perhaps the reason you're interested in this video is not just about the island, but rather how I got here. It was unlike really any trip I've ever taken, and I can't wait to share it with you, because it's quite an adventure to get here. Took a tumble on the way up. There are a handful of aviation